They say blood is thicker than water, but what if blood is the very thing drowning you? I never told anyone what I saw that night. Not the police. Not my neighbors. Not even my son. I stood in court, my hand trembling on the Bible, and said the one sentence that sealed my fate. My brother wasn't there. He didn't hurt her. That was a lie. A deadly one. The truth is, I walked in just seconds after it happened. His girlfriend lay crumpled on the kitchen floor, blood running down her cheek, her eyes wide with shock and fear. My brother stood over her, breathing like an animal, his fists still clenched. When he saw me, his eyes weren't filled with guilt. They were filled with calculation. He knew I'd protect him. I always had. And I did. I told the police she had fallen during an argument. That she was unstable. That maybe she hurt herself. I lied to everyone, just to keep him out of prison. I thought he'd be grateful. I thought he'd change. But monsters don't change. They evolve. After that day, he moved in with me. Said he needed time to get back on his feet. I cooked for him, cleaned his messes, took his insults. He started slow, verbal abuse, slamming doors, stealing money. But soon, the bruises started showing up. First on my arms, then my ribs. He said I was too slow, too loud, too useless. And every time I flinched, he laughed. One night, he beat me until I blacked out on the kitchen floor. When I woke up, my son was standing over me, but he turned away, pretended he didn't see. My own child, the boy I raised with every ounce of my soul. He looked right through me, like I was invisible, like I was already dead. And maybe I was. Days turned into weeks. My brother got meaner. My son got colder. I stopped leaving the house. People started forgetting I existed. But I was watching, listening, waiting, because I had a plan. It started the day I found my brother's burner phone under the couch. Messages, photos, videos, evidence of him dealing, hurting, hiding things. Things that would make the court forget I ever saved him. Things that could bury him forever. I started collecting it. Slowly, quietly. I made copies, backups. I wasn't strong enough to fight him with my hands, but I didn't need to. I had something better. Fear. One night, he came home drunk, furious that dinner wasn't hot enough. He threw the plate across the room and grabbed me by the hair, yanking me toward the sink. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I looked him dead in the eye and whispered, "You lay one more finger on me, and I'll send everything to the police." He froze. For the first time in years, he looked scared. That was the beginning. I didn't stop there. I started cutting off the money, exposing his lies to his friends. He lost his job, his reputation. Even the other thugs started backing away from him. I was turning the world against him, one whisper at a time. But the final blow? I told my son the truth. I sat him down and showed him the photos, the texts, the hospital bills. I told him everything, how I saved my brother, how I was punished for it every day, how I stayed silent to protect him. And when I finished, I expected silence. But he wept. He dropped to his knees and begged for my forgiveness. Said he was ashamed, that he didn't know, that he thought I was just weak. But now he saw what strength really looked like. That night, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. My brother? He's back in prison now on charges even I didn't know about. And me? I'm still healing. But every scar tells a story. A story that starts with pain and ends with power. If you're still here, thank you for listening to my story. Please like, share, and subscribe. It helps me more than you know. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? It gives me strength to know I'm not alone. They say monsters don't live under the bed, they live inside your home, in the body of someone you once loved. After I showed my son the truth and my brother was taken away in handcuffs, I thought it was over. I thought surviving meant healing. But scars aren't just on the skin, they cling to your spirit like wet wool, heavy and choking. My son tried to help in his way. He brought groceries, sat with me in silence, even hugged me once, awkwardly, like he was touching something fragile. But the damage was done. His absence in my darkest hours had built a wall between us, brick by silent brick. I still flinched when someone raised their hand too fast. I still jolted awake at the sound of keys in a lock. My body healed, yes, but my trust didn't. And then came the knock. Not the police. Not a neighbor. A woman young, maybe late 20s, her eyes bloodshot, one cheek swollen purple. She didn't speak at first. Just handed me an envelope and said, "I'm sorry." I had nowhere else to go. Inside were photos, new ones, of my brother after prison. With her. Bruises. Stitches. Fear etched across her face in every image. My stomach turned to ice. I had freed the world of him once, and he had found a new victim. I let her in, sat her down, and brewed tea with trembling hands. She was his new girlfriend, or hostage, really. He'd been released early. No one told me. No one warned her. He told her I was insane, that I ruined his life, that I framed him. He said I'd come after her. But she came to me anyway, because pain knows pain. I stared into her swollen face and saw myself 5 years ago. And I knew what I had to do. Not just for me, not just for her, but to end him. Truly, this time. Not in court. Not with mercy. I had something he never expected, a witness he hadn't broken, a woman he hadn't crushed. And me, the sister he thought he destroyed. I looked her in the eye and said, "We're going to burn him down." And this time, there would be no lies. Only justice. My kind of justice. I stared at the woman sitting on my couch, her fingers trembling around a chipped teacup, her other hand resting cautiously on the bruised side of her face, as if touching it too hard would split the skin open again. Her name was Kara, and she was just a girl who reminded me too much of the person I used to be before years of bruises hardened my soul into stone. She spoke in stutters and whispered half-sentences at first, the way the truly broken do when they think you might not believe them, when they've lived too long with fists answering every question. I listened. Not because I needed the details, I already knew what kind of hell my brother was capable of, but because she needed to say it, to rip the rot out of her lungs before it swallowed her whole. She told me how he tracked her every move, how he used his parole check-ins as cover to buy more burners, how he isolated her from her mother, her sister, her life. She told me about the way he laughed when she cried, about how he took her phone for 3 weeks just because she didn't answer his call on the first ring, about how he made her kneel when she apologized. That one made my jaw tighten. That was his favorite game. And when she said he'd started talking about fixing me next, that's when I knew I had waited too long. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about every woman like Kara. Every woman like me. Every woman who had ever stayed quiet and bled in silence, hoping the monster would forget to come back that night. But I didn't tell her that. Not yet. I looked calm. Steady. I told her to rest, to shower, to eat something. She hadn't touched food in 2 days. While she lay curled on my couch in borrowed clothes, I went into the basement. My real basement behind the fake wall. Because after everything I'd been through, after all the things I saw, I knew better than to think one round of justice was ever enough. I had been preparing. For years. Not just for him, but for anyone like him. I opened the chest I kept locked under the floorboards, burner phones, flash drives, printed copies of his messages, his fake IDs, cash from the drug deals he thought I never knew about. And then something more, his old parole officer's number. I called it, pretended to be someone else. Asked if he'd been checking in. He hadn't. Not for weeks. And the kicker? He hadn't been released early. He had escaped. And no one knew. Not even the damn system. I hung up, my hands ice cold, and walked back upstairs to find Kara sobbing in her sleep, her fists clenched in defense even in her dreams. I sat beside her, placed a blanket over her legs, and whispered, "You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're just not done yet. And neither was I. That night, I didn't sleep. I typed. I searched. I sent emails. I scheduled a delivery. I packed a bag. Because I wasn't just going to bring him down. I was going to make sure he felt it. I was done cleaning up his blood. Now he was going to drown in it. Slowly, quietly. And no one would save him. Just like no one saved us. The morning sunlight tried to crawl in through the dirty kitchen window, but even light seemed too ashamed to touch this house. Kara was still asleep, curled up like a child who hadn't known peace since she met my brother. Her face looked different now, softer, though the bruises still screamed their stories. I stood at the sink, hands deep in scalding water, scrubbing a coffee cup that had already been clean, and I thought about how many times I had stood in that same spot, wishing the water could burn away my memories. But memories don't wash off. They cling like the smell of his breath, thick with whiskey and rage, the way he used to whisper, "You owe me," right before the back of his hand split my lip open. But I didn't owe him anymore. He owed me. For every lie I told to save him. For every scar he left behind. For every time I swallowed my scream just to protect my son from the sound of his own uncle becoming a demon. I didn't wait for Kara to wake. I left her a note. Not one filled with warmth, but instructions. Don't leave. Don't open the door. Don't trust the police. I'll be back. I walked outside for the first time in weeks, my knees trembling, my heart hammering like it did that first time I told the court he was innocent. But this time I was walking into a different kind of lie, a trap, one of my own design. I knew where he'd be. The house on Fowler Street. The one he used to take girls to when he wanted to disappear. The one with the boarded-up garage and the false walls. I wore gloves. I brought a flash drive, loaded with every piece of filth I had on him. I even brought one of the burner phones he thought I threw away. I didn't plan to see him. Not yet. But I did plan to leave him a gift. I crept in through the back, the way he once taught me when we were just kids breaking into Dad's shed for cigarettes. I hated that I still remembered. The house reeked of stale beer, sweat, and something rotting. I could feel his presence in the filth, his energy stuck to the walls like mold. On the table were wrappers, pills, a half-loaded pistol, and a stained mattress on the floor. He hadn't changed, just slithered deeper into the filth. I placed the flash drive under the mattress where he'd find it, and when he did, he'd know someone had been there. But he wouldn't know who. Not yet. That was part of the plan. Fear first, then exposure, then the fall. I turned to leave, but as I reached the door, a creak behind me turned my blood to frost. A shadow moved in the hallway. I froze, heart slamming so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. And then nothing. Silence. I didn't run. I walked out. Slow. Calm. I had already decided. If he saw me, if he touched me again, I wouldn't scream. I'd stab. The knife in my pocket was small, but it would find its way home. But nothing happened. Maybe I imagined the noise. Or maybe he was watching, letting me go, thinking he still had control. Either way, it didn't matter. Because this was no longer his story. It was mine. And every move he made now, I'd be one step ahead. I wasn't just planning to destroy his life. I was going to bury it piece by rotten piece and make sure the whole world saw what I had protected for so long. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was the storm he didn't see coming. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Kara vomiting in the bathroom. Her body rejected everything, even water, as if the trauma she carried had poisoned her from the inside. I didn't ask questions. I simply sat outside the door, back against the wall, and waited until the dry heaving stopped and silence returned. When she came out, eyes glassy and red, she didn't apologize. I respected that. She wasn't trying to make herself small anymore. Good. That meant she was starting to shed the part of herself that he'd broken. I handed her water, then told her something simple, something that sounded so small but meant the world. You don't have to go back to being who you were. You just have to survive who you are now. She didn't speak, just nodded, And in that moment, I knew she was ready. We spent the next 2 days planning, carefully, like surgeons preparing for an operation that couldn't afford a single mistake. I taught her how to fake a call to a parole officer, how to copy files without leaving a digital footprint, how to look a monster in the eye without blinking. She caught on fast. Fear sharpens the mind, and pain is a brutal teacher. We used his ego against him, sending texts from an anonymous number, teasing secrets only someone close would know. The bait worked. I watched as he spiraled, calling old contacts, threatening shadows, accusing ghosts. His paranoia grew with every hour. I knew that stage well. That's when they start unraveling. That's when they make mistakes. But then, something happened I didn't expect. My son showed up. He stood in my doorway like a stranger, older, quieter, guilt draped over his shoulders like a heavy coat. He didn't come in right away. Just stared at me, eyes searching for a version of his mother he'd buried years ago. "Mom," he said, voice raw, "I didn't come to fix anything. I just came to help." I should have closed the door in his face. Should have turned my back like he did when I bled on the kitchen floor. But I didn't, because no one had helped me once. And I couldn't become what hurt me. He stepped inside, saw Kara, and didn't flinch. Good. He saw the bruises, the fear, the mirrored pain, and I watched something shift in his eyes, shame mixed with purpose. We didn't speak of the past. We spoke of the trap. 3 minds now, all aligned, all fueled by pain but sharpened by resolve. We mapped out where my brother might run. We monitored his burner activity. We timed his patterns. And then we decided we would corner him not with violence, but with exposure. Public. Loud. Undeniable. We planned to lead him to an abandoned lot where he once stashed stolen goods, trick him into thinking an old contact had resurfaced. But what we were really setting was a scene. Cameras hidden. Police alerted anonymously with a tip linking him to parole violations, new threats, and drug activity. It was going to be clean. Controlled. Bloodless. But monsters never go down easy. The night before we were to execute the plan, Kara woke up screaming. His voice had haunted her in her sleep. She said she saw him standing in the hallway, that he whispered her name through the vent. I checked every lock, every window. Everything was shut. But still, something felt off. Like he knew. Like he was circling us. And that's when I realized we weren't the only ones watching. He was hunting us too. But that was fine. Let him come. Because I wasn't afraid anymore. And this time, I wasn't just protecting myself. I was leading him straight into the fire. The night air was colder than I remembered, thick with the kind of stillness that presses against your skin and whispers something's coming. Kara stayed behind that evening, tucked in the safety of the locked house, with every curtain drawn and my son watching over her. He offered to come with me, but I told him no. This part, I needed to do alone. Not out of pride, but because the fire in my bones wasn't his to carry. I had spent years suffering in silence, protecting people who let me rot, burying the truth with smiles and stitched lips. But now I was walking toward the very man I once shielded from a prison sentence, the man who repaid my sacrifice with bruises and broken ribs, who used my loyalty as a leash, and my silence as fuel. I parked 4 blocks from the abandoned lot, the one we knew he still used like a graveyard for his dirty secrets. Every step toward that dark space felt like a funeral march, but I wasn't the one being buried tonight. I waited in the shadows, eyes fixed on the rusted gate, heart beating like a war drum in my chest. And then I saw him. My brother. He hadn't changed much, same hunched walk, same twitching jaw when he was high, same cruel eyes that scanned the world like everything belonged to him. He was muttering to himself, clutching a phone, pacing. I had baited him with a message, "Your stash is gone. You've got 1 hour to fix it. Don't be late." He thought someone was blackmailing him. He had no idea it was me. Not yet. He came closer to the center of the lot, right where we wanted him. I slipped further behind the fence, watching him unravel in real time. He screamed into the night, throwing a bottle that shattered across the concrete. "Who's playing me?" he shouted, his voice cracking, raw, dangerous. I took a deep breath, stepped into the moonlight, and whispered, "I am." He froze. For a second, just one heartbeat, I saw something I hadn't seen in him in years. Fear. "You," he spat, taking a step forward. "You dare show your face after what you did to me?" My laugh was low, bitter. "After what I did to you? You should still be rotting behind bars." He rushed at me, but I didn't flinch. That froze him. Monsters expect fear, they feed on it. But I was hollow now. Empty of fear. Full of fire. "I should have let you burn," I said as he grabbed my arm, his grip tighter than a vice. But he didn't know what I'd done. I'd already triggered the tracker. Police were watching the live feed. We had the audio, the setup, the confession in his own words. But then he said something that nearly shattered me. "You think you're smarter than me? You think the cops are gonna save you again?" He leaned in. "I already paid one of them. They won't come." My blood ran cold. Could he be lying? Or worse, was he telling the truth? Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Not police. Not my son. Two men stepped into the lot from the alley, strangers, rough-looking, no badges. My brother smiled. "You thought you were the only one who could play the game," he said, eyes gleaming. I backed up, hands trembling. For the first time in weeks, panic clawed up my spine. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I pressed the second button on the remote in my pocket, Plan B. A shrill alarm screamed from the car I'd parked nearby. Lights. Noise. Chaos. The men flinched, confused, and in that instant, I ran. I bolted through the gate, through the alley, into the night. I didn't need to fight him, not now, because the footage had been sent. The flash drive had backups. The system was rigged. Even if the police didn't come, someone would. Reporters. Lawyers. Investigators. I had buried the truth for years, but tonight, I exhumed it and tossed it into the world like gasoline. When I got home, Kara was crying. My son stood like a soldier, his face pale, but his eyes alive with something that hadn't been there before, respect. And I told them everything. No lies. No edits. Just truth. Because I was done protecting anyone but myself. And my brother? He still thought he won. But the next knock on his door wouldn't be mine. It would be every ghost he left behind, wearing a badge. For 3 days, the house felt like a ticking bomb. Kara barely slept, always peeking out the window, jumping at the sound of passing cars. My son kept pacing, as if each creak of the floorboards could summon my brother from the shadows. But me? I was calm. Not because I felt safe, but because I had finally done something. I had shifted the power. No more hiding. No more patching wounds in the dark. I'd put the noose around my brother's neck. Now, I was just waiting for the world to pull the rope. The footage was out. 3 independent journalists had responded to the anonymous tip, and I watched the views climb by the hour. The images were damning. My brother dealing, yelling, grabbing my arm, threatening lives. The timestamps matched his parole gaps. The audio caught his confession. Every lie I told for him had now been turned against him, and it felt like justice was finally crawling out of its grave. Then came the knock. It was late, too late for mail, too early for trouble. Kara stiffened. My son looked at me, waiting for a signal. I nodded, slow. "Wait here." I opened the door with a knife behind my back, half expecting a bloodied face, a threat, maybe worse. But it wasn't him. It was her. A girl, early 20s, thin, bruised, with dark circles under her eyes and one arm clutching a plastic grocery bag like it was her only shield. "Are you her?" she asked. Her voice cracked. "The one who exposed Michael?" My breath caught in my throat. Michael. My brother's real name. One he hadn't used since before the first girl he nearly killed disappeared without pressing charges. "Who are you?" I asked quietly. "I'm one of the girls he locked in that basement," she whispered. 2 years ago. I got out. But no one ever believed me. I saw your video. I saw your face. I thought, maybe you'd believe me too. My knees nearly buckled. I pulled her inside, shut the door, and something inside me shattered. She sat next to Kara like they were long-lost sisters of pain, speaking in the same silence, the same haunted glances. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It never really had been. This was about undoing what I'd allowed to grow by protecting him, by saving him, by believing I could fix him when all he ever wanted was control. That night, the three of us stayed up, comparing wounds. Literal and emotional. My son didn't speak. He just listened. And when that girl, her name was June, showed him a scar across her shoulder, shaped like a key, carved with a blade, I saw him turn pale. He did this, my son whispered. June nodded. Said it was to remind me I was his property. My son excused himself, went to the bathroom, but I could hear him crying through the door. Quiet. Shameful. I didn't comfort him. I couldn't. Because sometimes you need the guilt to grow strong enough to fight. The next morning, the news broke. Former felon and escapee Michael Dern spotted in viral video threatening multiple women, parole officers under investigation. My brother's face was everywhere. Finally, but instead of running, he escalated. That afternoon, someone threw a rock through our living room window. Taped to it was a note, "You forgot who taught you how to survive." Kara screamed. June started shaking. My son grabbed the bat from under the couch. And me? I smiled. Because that note told me exactly what I needed to know. He was desperate. And desperate men make fatal mistakes. He thought I was still the same woman who once lied for him in court, who once stitched her own wounds in the bathroom mirror so no one would find out. But now I had an army of the broken behind me. And together, we weren't afraid of the monster anymore. We were hunting him. We didn't sleep that night. None of us. June curled up on the couch with a kitchen knife under her pillow. Kara sat with her back to the wall, her eyes fixed on the shattered window, like she expected him to crawl through it at any moment. My son paced the hallway, his hand never leaving the bat. But me? I was in the basement planning. You see, my brother always believed fear was a weapon only he could hold. That he owned it, wielded it, delivered it like a gift wrapped in violence. But what he forgot is that fear, once swallowed enough times, becomes something else, something sharper. I spent years chewing on fear until it turned into rage. And now I was feeding it back to him, one whisper at a time. He thought the video was bad? He hadn't seen the rest. I still had recordings, messages, screenshots from girls like June who had escaped but never spoken, statements I never gave in court, and locations of things he'd buried, both metaphorical and real. I had waited years, keeping it all hidden in a file labeled insurance. Funny thing is, I never planned to use it. I thought maybe he'd change. Maybe the beatings would stop. Maybe the monster had a heart. But monsters don't evolve. They infect. By morning, I released the next piece. Audio of him bragging about how he taught that Kara discipline, and how I was just a dumb sister, too afraid to bite back. The clip went viral in less than 2 hours. Hashtags exploded. Feminist pages reposted it. Survivors reached out. And one message stood out among them all, from a woman named Isla who claimed she had a child with him. She sent photos, DNA proof, bruises, more scars. I asked her one question: would you help us bring him down? Her reply came in a single word: gladly. He called me that evening. First time in years. Where are you? His voice was raw, furious, desperate. Close, I said. What do you want? He growled. To teach you fear, I whispered. Like you taught us. He screamed something, but I hung up. And then I sent him the photo, a picture of Isla holding his child, her face bruised, but her eyes burning. He'd never seen her again. She'd escaped years ago. He thought she was dead. Let that image rot his mind. That night, I returned to the house on Fowler Street. Alone. I knew he'd go back there. Monsters always return to their nests when they're wounded. But what he didn't know is, I had left something else behind. Buried under the floorboards of the bathroom was an old phone with a preset recording app. And tonight, I planned to collect its final confession. He was there. Hi. Shaking. Rambling. I listened from the shadows outside the window as he screamed into the room, pacing, talking to ghosts. She thinks she's clever. She forgets I own her pain. She forgets I raised her to be like this. He kicked the wall. They all deserved it. Every one of them. Especially Kara. Stupid girl. Weak. All of them weak. The app captured everything. Confession. Motivation. Admission of past abuse. Even names. I backed away slowly, breath held, and when I reached the alley, I hit send. Not to the police. To every journalist who'd begged me for an exclusive. Let the world hear what we'd lived through. By the time I got home, June was asleep. Kara was finally smiling. My son hugged me for the first time in years. And I knew. This wasn't revenge. It was resurrection. I wasn't just burning my brother's name. I was burying the myth that he ever deserved to be saved. We all felt it before it happened. That heavy silence in the air, too thick to breathe through. The kind of stillness you only get right before a storm when the world holds its breath. June woke up first, sitting bolt upright on the couch. Kara followed, frozen in the hallway like a deer sensing the growl of a predator. My son stood at the kitchen window and muttered, "He's here." I didn't ask how they knew. When someone's terrorized you long enough, their presence changes the oxygen. The moment I heard the floorboard creak on the back porch, I knew he'd come for blood. But he wasn't going to find fear this time. He was going to find me. We'd rehearsed this moment. Every room in the house was rigged. Every blind spot eliminated. Phones charged. Exit routes memorized. But he didn't bother sneaking in. He kicked the back door straight off its hinges like the animal he was, roaring, "Where are you, bitches?" June gasped. Kara ran upstairs as planned, and my son grabbed the decoy bat while I stood in the dining room with the real weapon, a taser rigged with a sharpened rod duct taped to the tip. Primitive. Personal. He stomped through the kitchen, looking wild-eyed and strung out. And when his eyes landed on me, he actually laughed. "Still pretending to be tough, huh?" He sneered. "You were always the weak one, sister." I stepped forward. "No," I said. "I was always the silent one." "That's not the same." He lunged, but this time I didn't flinch. I jammed the taser into his side and pressed the button. He screamed, dropped to one knee, but still tried to reach for me. My son appeared behind him, swung the bat and nodded his head, but at his knees. The crack echoed through the house. My brother collapsed. And then, finally, he looked afraid. I knelt beside him. "You know what fear feels like now?" I whispered. "It's not the pain. It's the knowing. The knowing you can't win anymore. That everyone you controlled, everyone you broke, has finally learned how to fight." He spat blood. "You think anyone's going to believe you? You're just as dirty." That's when June stepped forward. She held her phone up, recording. "Say that again," she said. He froze. She was live streaming it all. His face, his voice, his blood. Kara stepped into the room holding the burner phone she'd found hidden in his old stash, the one full of saved messages to his parole officer, bribes, threats, blackmail. She threw it on the floor in front of him. "We already sent copies," she said calmly. He looked from one woman to the next, and for the first time, he understood what we had become. Not survivors. Executioners. The police did show up, eventually, thanks to the panic button my son pressed after the second blow. But when they arrived, we weren't crying. We weren't hiding. We were standing over a broken man, with truth bleeding out of every scar he ever gave us. They arrested him. Not just for breaking and entering, not just for parole violation, but for the trail of abuse, assault, trafficking, and corruption now linked to his name. The DA called it a nest of depravity built on decades of silence. And we We were done being silent. That night, as the house emptied and the flashing lights disappeared down the street, June poured us each a glass of water, shaky hands, but a strong smile. Kara leaned on my shoulder and whispered, "You did it." But I shook my head. "We did it." And my brother? He wasn't gone yet, but he was finished. Because sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge. Sometimes it wears the bruises you gave it and smiles when the fear finally changes sides. The courthouse smelled like old paper and lies. I hadn't set foot in one since the day I swore under oath to protect my brother, fabricating stories with shaking hands and tear-filled eyes, believing, hoping that if I saved him once, he'd stop hurting people. But he didn't stop. He only got smarter, crueler. And now here I was again, not to protect him, but to bury him. It wasn't just me testifying. They all came. June, Kara, Isla, even a few I hadn't met until that morning, women who had carried their trauma in silence for years, watching his arrest on the news and realizing they weren't crazy, weren't alone. They brought evidence. Photos, texts, diaries with dates that aligned too perfectly with police reports that had gone mysteriously missing. Every detail, every bruise, every threat, they all painted a picture of a man who didn't just hurt people. He hunted them. My son sat behind me, arms crossed tight across his chest, jaw clenched like a trap. He hadn't said much in days, but when I took the stand and told the truth for the very first time, he leaned forward, just slightly, as if hearing my confession for the first time gave him permission to feel something again. "I lied to protect him," I said. "I thought saving him would save us." But all I did was chain myself to his rage. Every punch, every kick, every scream behind closed doors, it wasn't random. It was survival, his survival, bought with my silence. The room didn't blink. The DA walked forward and placed a photo in front of me. My arms, black and blue. "Do you recognize this?" I nodded. "Who did that to you?" "My brother," I said. "And sometimes, my husband." Because when you make abuse normal in one relationship, it becomes contagious. Murmurs echoed through the room. And then came the footage. June's scar, Isla's child's paternity, Kara's psychiatric evaluations, all pointing to years of manipulation and grooming. It wasn't just a criminal case. It was an unmasking. But the hardest part wasn't testifying. It was the defense. They tried to twist it, of course. Claimed we were bitter, vengeful, that we waited too long, that I was mentally unstable, looking for attention. They even played clips of me in the hospital after one of my accidents, slurring from painkillers, begging to go home. I'd told them I fell down the stairs. Everyone knew I hadn't. But then came the final witness, my son. He stood there, tall, trembling, and raw. "I used to think my mom was weak," he began, voice cracking. "I watched her cover bruises and never cry. I thought she was too scared to leave. Too loyal. But I get it now. She wasn't weak. She was alone. She carried all of us, me, my dad, even my uncle, on her back. And when she finally fought back, she didn't just save herself. She saved me." He looked at me then. Really looked. "I'm sorry I ever made you feel small." I wept. Not because I needed forgiveness, but because it meant the chain had finally broken. When the verdict came in, it wasn't a celebration. It was a release. Guilty on all counts. The judge didn't offer sympathy. Just a sentence so long it might as well have been a lifetime. As they led my brother away, he looked at me, eyes hollow, mouth trembling. And for the first time, he looked like the one begging to be saved. But no one moved. Not me, not June, not Kara, not Isla. We just watched him disappear. And when the courtroom emptied, my son took my hand. "We're free," he whispered. But I shook my head. "Now we start learning how to be." I always believed the day he was locked away would feel like flying. That I'd walk outside, take a deep breath, and feel the weight peel off my bones like dead skin. But the truth is, freedom doesn't come all at once. It comes in pieces, uneven, slow, and full of shadows. Some mornings I still woke up expecting footsteps down the hall, the sudden crack of a belt against the wall just to make me flinch. Sometimes I'd still move quietly through the kitchen out of habit, afraid of making too much noise. Kara did it too, always checking the locks, jumping at the kettle whistle. June barely slept. We were free, yes, but we were also broken in places no judge could fix. My son stayed close, always hovering nearby, like he was afraid to leave me alone with my memories. He cleaned the house more than usual, cooked, repaired windows. But I noticed he never looked too long in mirrors. Maybe he was afraid he'd see what his silence allowed. I didn't push him. Some guilt needs time to soften into accountability. But one afternoon, he handed me something. An old envelope. My handwriting. "I found this in Dad's box," he said. I opened it. It was the letter I had written to myself the day I decided not to testify against my brother in court. The day I saved him instead. The handwriting was frantic, tear-stained. I had written, "If I lose him, I lose my family. If I protect him, maybe he'll stop." I read it once. Then I tore it to pieces. "No more saving monsters," I whispered. That night, something changed. June came downstairs with a piece of paper. "I'm thinking about speaking at a local center," she said. "For survivors. Maybe start a group." Her voice was quiet, unsure. Would that be okay?" "Okay," I said. "That would be brave." Kara offered to design the flyers. My son said he'd drive them wherever they needed to go. And just like that, something began to bloom in the ashes of everything we'd lost. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was purpose. The next week, I got a call from a lawyer. Not for another court date, but for a settlement. Apparently, a handful of parole officers and one former detective were now under investigation for suppressing multiple reports against my brother. A class action suit had formed. They were asking if I'd be willing to become a named plaintiff. My answer was simple, absolutely. But it wasn't about money. It was about legacy. Because for years, I had been the woman who lied for him, who cried behind closed doors and hid bruises with makeup and excuses. But now, I was the woman making the system answer for what it ignored. I told June. She smiled. "Did you ever think we'd make it here?" she asked. "No," I said honestly. "But maybe that's what makes it real." Still, there were nights. Nights when the silence was too quiet, when the memories crawled up the walls like smoke. Nights when I looked at myself in the mirror and asked, how could I have ever let it get that far? And that's when I'd remind myself, because I was taught to love louder than I screamed. Because I believed I could fix a monster with kindness. Because I didn't know what power looked like until I bled for it. Now I do. And soon, so would everyone else. Because I wasn't done yet. I wasn't looking for more pain. I had enough scars to map a lifetime. But healing has a strange hunger. It pulls you back to the places you tried to forget. Demands answers you're not sure you want. That's why I went to the cabin. The one deep in the woods, where he used to take business trips. He once made me scrub the floors there after dragging me by the hair for dropping a wine bottle. Said it was sacred. Said it was his safe space. But monsters build sanctuaries for their sins, not peace. I brought June with me. Kara insisted on coming too, but I told her to stay. She'd done enough. June and I packed flashlights, gloves, and more resolve than sense. The air smelled like wet bark and something older. As we unlocked the rusted front door, I swear the place exhaled dust and evil. It was cold, hollow, the kind of silence that wasn't empty but watching. We searched for hours. Behind drywall, under the rotted mattress, beneath floorboards. Nothing. Just mold and bad memories until June knelt in the corner of the basement and tapped on the bricks. One of them sounded different. Hollow. We chipped it loose with a crowbar. Behind it, a box. Old. Heavy. Locked. She looked at me, wide-eyed. Should we open it? I nodded. The lock snapped easily under the pressure of a hammer. Inside were photos. Dozens. Maybe more. All women, most of them scared, some unconscious, all branded with dates and sickening labels in his handwriting. A record of his victims, a trophy chest of torment. My stomach turned. Some were girls we already knew. Isla, June, Kara, but there were more. So many more. At the bottom was a notebook. Names, transactions, codes, and one entry circled in red. Make sure she disappears next time. No more second chances. Too many questions. It was dated 3 months before he last attacked Kara. He planned to erase her. Permanently. I couldn't breathe. He wasn't just violent. He was calculating. Methodical. Cruel in a way we hadn't fully imagined. We didn't call the police right away. First, we scanned everything. Copied the files. Took video of the box and the hidden wall. We knew now too many people had covered for him before. Trusted hands were often the dirtiest. Then we called Isla. She came in tears, shaking but strong. This is enough, she whispered. This'll take them all down. And we believed it. Because this wasn't just a case anymore. It was a crusade. By the next day, federal agents had the cabin locked down. The evidence was undeniable. And then the ripple began, investigations reopened. Cases re-examined. Missing persons linked to locations in that book. One detective resigned before charges could hit. 2 officers were arrested for destroying reports. And me? I was interviewed on national TV. They asked me what made me finally fight back. I looked into the camera and said, because pain taught me how to kneel. But survival taught me how to rise. And now I will never kneel again. The cabin was burned down a week later. Arson, they said. No one ever caught. But I didn't cry. Some places don't deserve to stand. My son watched the flames with me. He put his arm around me, hesitant. Careful, as if afraid I'd pull away. But I didn't. I leaned in. Because we weren't just surviving anymore. We were changing the ending. I thought prison would break him. That isolation would shrink him into a memory, a shadow of the beast who once ruled our lives. But men like my brother don't rot quietly. They rage. They reach. Even behind bars. Especially when they know the walls outside are finally talking louder than their fists ever did. It started with a letter. A plain white envelope, no return address, dropped in my mailbox like a piece of dead skin. My hands trembled the moment I touched it, the way trauma teaches your body to recognize danger before your mind catches up. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. Cold. Stop digging. You've done enough damage. People are watching. You don't want to wake the rest of the ghosts. There was no signature. But the chill in my spine told me exactly whose fingerprints lived between those lines. I didn't tell June or Kara at first. I didn't want to frighten them again. But that night, I sat by the window with a knife in one hand and a lighter in the other, burning the letter piece by piece, watching his threat vanish into ash. The next day, Isla called me, shaking. She got a letter too. So did June. So did the counselor at the shelter who'd helped document Kara's trauma for court. He was orchestrating fear from his cell, reaching through pipes and shadows, sending whispers through people who still owed him favors or feared him more than they trusted the law. But this time, we didn't hide. We brought the letters to the FBI. And we went public again. Another interview. This time together. June beside me. Isla holding Kara's hand. We read the threats aloud. Looked into the camera and said his name. Told the world, even caged monsters still bite, but their teeth are dull if you stop running. And something incredible happened. Other women started coming forward. One had been trafficked by his associates. Another had been forced to smuggle drugs. All of them had stories they'd buried. And all of them finally felt like they weren't alone. But the monster didn't take humiliation lightly. 2 weeks later, I came home to find my living room torn apart. Furniture upended. Picture frames shattered. My wedding photo cracked straight through my face. My son was the one who found it first. He called me, breathless, furious. Stay where you are, he said. Don't come home yet. I'll clean it up. No, I told him. Let me see it. Because I needed to feel the ugliness again. To stare it down and remember that fear only wins when you flinch. We filed a report. The police found no signs of forced entry. But I found something else tucked beneath the couch cushion. A flash drive. And on it, recordings. Phone calls. One with a guard. Another with a visitor, one of the very parole officers under investigation. They were trying to silence witnesses. Bury files. Bribe women to recant their statements. But the recording proved something bigger. He wasn't just dangerous. He still had power. And now we had proof. I handed the drive to the prosecutor myself. That one decision, one drive, one name led to a second wave of arrests. Guards, officers, even a judge who had previously dismissed one of Kara's petitions without reading it. Suddenly, the justice system wasn't just punishing him. It was cleansing itself. And me? I didn't move houses, didn't change my number, didn't disappear. I hosted a vigil instead. Right on my front lawn. Photos of survivors lit by candles. Women standing shoulder to shoulder. My son beside me, holding a sign that said, "You tried to break her. Now she's breaking the silence." A local reporter asked if I was scared. I looked out at the women around me, those who had once whispered their truth with shaking voices, now screaming it through megaphones. And I said, he taught us fear. But we taught each other how to fight. That night, I slept with the window open. No knife. No panic. Just the sound of wind through the trees. It didn't feel like freedom yet. But it sure as hell wasn't fear. It was bound to happen. Secrets don't stay buried forever, no matter how many years you hide them under layers of silence and self-sacrifice. But I never expected the moment to hit me like that, quiet, unassuming, a simple rustle of paper in the hands of someone I loved more than life itself. He was in the attic, going through old boxes. Said he wanted to donate things. I didn't think twice, until he came down with that folder in his hands. The court transcripts. From the case I lied in. The day I committed perjury to keep my brother out of prison. The day I chose blood over justice because I thought I was saving my son. He looked pale, shaken, confused. Why did you do it? He asked, voice hollow. Why would you lie to protect him after what he did to you? I opened my mouth, but no words came. My knees buckled, and I sat down on the edge of the couch like a puppet whose strings had finally snapped. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it wanted to burst free just to escape the weight of truth. I didn't do it for him, I said finally. I did it for you. He blinked. What are you talking about? And that's when I told him. Told him how my brother had threatened him, said he'd make my son disappear if I ever went against him. Said accidents happened all the time. Said the world was full of mothers who outlived their children. I believed him, I whispered. I believed he'd find a way. And I couldn't risk losing you. So I stood in court and said he didn't touch me, that he was a good man. I watched the jury nod like sheep. And I died inside. Silence. A full minute passed. Maybe more. He stared at me like I was a stranger. Like I'd just confessed to burning our home to the ground with us inside. I always wondered, he said coldly, why you let him come around. Why you never pressed charges. I thought you were scared. Or stupid. But you were complicit. That word. Complicit. It gutted me. No, I said, reaching for him. I was desperate. He stood up. Backed away. You let him near me. You let that animal sit at my birthday dinners. You, his voice cracked. You hugged him after he hurt you. You smiled in front of me. I was pretending. I cried. Pretending to keep you safe. Pretending because I didn't know what else to do. I was drowning and I couldn't let you see it. But you let me drown later, he said. You let Dad hurt you. You let me turn into someone I hate. You never fought for me, only protected me from truths I had a right to know. And then he left. No yelling. No slammed door. Just absence. That night was the first time in years I sat in the kitchen alone and felt truly cold. Not from fear, but from loss. Because I'd carried the lie like armor, believing it would protect him from a darkness he couldn't handle. But now I realized I hadn't saved him. I'd made him grow up with blinders. And now, taking them off hurt more than I ever imagined. For 3 days, he didn't call. Didn't answer texts. Didn't come home. June came over. Sat beside me. He needs time, she said. Sometimes the truth makes people run. But he'll remember why you did it. And when he does, he'll come back. I nodded. But my chest ached like something was splitting open. On the 4th day, I heard the front door unlock. He walked in, sat down across from me. No expression. I'm not ready to forgive you, he said. Not yet. I nodded. That's okay. But I finally understand, he added. And I want to learn who you really are. Not the mother I thought I knew. The woman who survived hell to raise me. My lip trembled. Are you sure you want to know? He looked me in the eye. I think I need to. And so I told him. Everything. We sat there for hours, just the two of us, in the quiet hum of a house that had forgotten how to breathe. At first, it was like walking through shattered glass barefoot, every word painful, every memory a razor. But I didn't hold back. Not anymore. No more lies. No more editing the past to protect him. I want you to see, I whispered. He nodded slowly, unsure. I stood and took off my sweater, then unbuttoned the loose blouse beneath. He sat frozen as I turned around and let the fabric slip off my shoulders. The silence stretched like a rope between us. My back told a story no courtroom transcript ever could. There were old bruises that had never fully faded, welts that once bled and then healed wrong, a thin white scar under my shoulder blade where a belt buckle split skin. I didn't flinch. I didn't cover up. I wanted him to see what love had cost me. When I turned to face him, I saw his lip tremble, his throat tighten. His eyes blinked fast like he could stop the flood just by force of will. He stood, reached out, then stopped himself. Can I? He asked, voice breaking. I nodded. His hands touched my shoulders, feather-light, as if he feared he'd hurt me even by kindness. Then, slowly, he pulled me into him. I felt his body shudder against mine. And then came the thing I never thought I'd live to witness. He wept. Not loud, not messy, but real. Tears that came from somewhere deep, someplace in his soul that had been locked for too long. He cried for the child he used to be, for the man he became, and for the mother he was only now beginning to truly see. I didn't know, he whispered into my neck. God, I didn't know. I know, I said. And I'm not angry you didn't. I'm just glad you do now. We stood there until the walls stopped spinning and the silence turned warm again. Later that night, he sat beside me with the old family photo album. He opened it carefully, like it might bite. And page by page, he started asking questions. Was this after? What happened here? Did you smile because you had to, or because you hoped it'd get better? I answered each one honestly. Some stories were short. Some burned to tell. Some I could barely get through. But when I finished, he said something I will never forget. You were never weak. You were just surviving a war no one else saw. And I think you've already won. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay awake in bed and listened to the wind outside, thinking of all the nights I prayed for this moment. Not for forgiveness, but understanding. I never needed him to be proud of me. I just needed him to know who I really was. The next morning, he came into the kitchen early. I signed up for therapy, he said. I want to work on everything. I want to break this chain, Mom. I nodded. Good, I said. Because chains only end when someone chooses to stop dragging them. He smiled, for real this time. And then he said, let's burn the old family album. I blinked. What? Let's make a new one, he said. From now. From truth. No more pretending. I cried. I won't lie. But I lit the match myself. And watched the old lies curl into smoke. By now, the world knew my story. Whispers had turned into headlines. A woman who once knelt in silence was now standing, loudly, with fire in her eyes. But justice isn't just about courtrooms or locked doors. Sometimes it's about what you do with the truth after the storm dies down. And I had one last storm to summon. See, they thought prison was the end of it. My brother behind bars. My husband on trial for the horrors he inflicted. The corrupt officials exposed. But they didn't see the rot that still thrived underground. The men who profited from pain. The ones who never laid a hand on me but handed out my suffering like contracts. I'd collected names, dates, patterns. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was an avenger. I spent nights reading documents, learning laws, connecting dots no one had dared to trace before. I worked with journalists who had once doubted me. Now they listened. Now they followed my lead. I built a case. Not just against the monsters who beat me, but against the men and women who watched. Who knew? Who said nothing? One of them was the doctor who stitched me up more than once and never reported anything. Another was the counselor who dismissed Kara's bruises as teenage acting out. Even a charity board member who donated money to our abuser's legal fund, calling it supporting family values. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was furious. And fury, when sharpened, becomes justice. I started a foundation, the Reckoning Chain. A group of women, survivors, whistleblowers, and even former law enforcement who left the force because they refused to look the other way. We held press conferences, released files, named names. One by one, the silent enablers began to fall. I watched a wealthy politician lose his seat after we revealed he suppressed reports of domestic violence in exchange for campaign funding. A judge was suspended for tampering with a prior case, my case. Even the police chief who once asked me why I didn't just leave resigned the morning after we aired our interview. And yet, none of it felt like revenge. It felt like restoration. One night, I was invited to speak at a university. A hall full of students, mostly women, many in tears before I even opened my mouth. I told them everything. Not just what happened to me, but what I did about it. Don't let the world reduce you to what you've survived, I said. Turn it into your weapon. Turn it into your war cry. After the applause, a girl no older than 17 came up to me. Her eyes brimmed with pain. My uncle hurt me, she said softly. No one believes me. I held her hand. I do. And we're going to make sure they do too. She wasn't the only one. I'd become something more than a mother, more than a survivor. I had become a mirror reflecting back the truth the world tried to ignore. My son stood beside me every step. He no longer called me just mom. He called me the bravest woman alive. And in his eyes, I finally saw not the boy I had saved, but the man I had raised. The reckoning had begun, and it had my name carved into its spine. I thought prison would scare him, that being caught, being exposed, would shrink the arrogant shadow my husband had always cast over me. But men like him don't fear justice, they believe they're above it. And he proved it the day he faked chest pains in court and collapsed like a cheap actor on a stained stage, delaying the trial by weeks. He played the victim. And the system almost believed him. Almost. But not me. I knew every twitch in that man's body, every breath he took before a lie left his mouth. And the moment I saw his hand clutching his chest with just the right amount of trembling, I knew what he was doing, stalling. The courts rescheduled. The jury was dismissed. Medical records were requested. A new psychiatric evaluation ordered. The game had begun. And I knew if I didn't act fast, he'd slither his way into a hospital bed instead of a prison cell. Or worse, get declared mentally unfit, institutionalized for a few quiet years, and then released. I refused to let that happen. So I set the trap. I asked to visit him in the medical ward, knowing he'd allow it. He still thought he could manipulate me. Still believed I was the broken woman who once begged him not to hit me where it would show. But this time, I walked in wearing a wire. And not just any wire. I'd worked with the investigators from the Reckoning Chain. They'd coached me, legally equipped me, and prepared the DA's office for what I was about to pull. I greeted him with a smile. He smirked. You look good, sweetheart. Even after all this drama, still know how to walk into a room. I kept smiling. Did you fake the heart attack, Ray? I asked softly, letting my voice shake just enough. He chuckled. What do you think? I looked down. Let the silence stretch. Then he leaned forward, voice low, arrogant as ever. Of course I faked it. You think I'm gonna rot in a cage while you sit on some high horse playing hero for the cameras? I built our life. I owned it. You were just the wallpaper. The rage in me boiled, but I kept my face soft. Do you regret any of it? I whispered. He laughed. Laughed so loud it echoed in the sterile room. Regret? I regret not finishing the job the night you screamed so loud the neighbors called the cops. I should have shut you up for good. That was it. The confession. I stood. Thank you, I said, and smiled one last time. Wait, what? His smile faded. What do you mean, thank you? I tapped my blouse where the mic was hidden. Every word, Ray. Every damn word. You just sentenced yourself. The look on his face, shock melting into rage, was almost poetic. He lunged at me, forgetting the 4 in his arm, forgetting the cameras in the hallway, forgetting that his hands were now not just metaphorically stained with guilt, they were caught. Security dragged him back into the bed as I walked out, the wire now filled with his snarling final act of control. That recording sealed the trial. When court resumed, they played it for the jury. Every word, every boast, every threat. And this time, when the sentence was read, 40 years, without the possibility of parole, he didn't fake a thing. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stared at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. Because I wasn't his wife anymore. I wasn't his punching bag, his silence, his shame. I was the woman who had outlived his evil. And I was the one who finally caged him. For good. They said my husband was the worst. And maybe in some ways he was. But my brother? He was the first. The beginning of it all. The one who planted the seed of silence in me so young that I didn't even know it was growing into rot. He once told me, after a beating, you're nothing without me. And for a long time, I believed him. He was blood. He was family. And he's that word like a chain. So when I lied in court to save him, when I perjured myself to keep him out of prison, I wasn't just protecting my son. I was also feeding the lie he'd built around all of us. That he was untouchable. That pain was his right, and my survival was a favor he granted me. But now? Now I was no longer afraid of the monster in the family tree. He was locked up. Not because of me, but because of what came after. Assaults, threats, a woman half his age found bruised and shaking in a cheap motel, begging the police to believe her. I stayed quiet during his second trial. I didn't lie this time. I just watched. And he saw me. Sat in that courtroom, chained at the wrists, and stared at me with venom in his eyes. Like I had betrayed him. The irony nearly made me laugh. Then came the letter. He'd written it from prison, 8 pages long. At first, he blamed me. Said I turned the world against him. Said I'd twisted everything and that I owed him my silence, at the very least. But by page 5, something shifted. He begged. Begged me to visit. Begged me to forgive him. Begged me to remember the good times, the childhood memories he claimed still mattered. I almost threw the letter in the fire. Almost. But I didn't. I visited him instead. Not because he deserved it, but because I needed to see the fall. When I walked into the visitation room, he looked smaller than I remembered. Not just in size, but in presence. His eyes darted nervously. His mouth twitched into a practiced smile. You came, he said. I sat down. Silent. He leaned forward. I need you to know I was sick. I didn't mean to hurt you like that. You were always my baby sister, you know? I protected you. I blinked. Protected me? He nodded. Remember when those boys bullied you in 6th grade? I scared them off. I always had your back. I leaned in. And then you used that same back to pin me against walls. To drag me by my hair. To spit in my face when I didn't agree with you. He looked away. I was just angry, messed up from our parents. You know what they did to us. No, I said sharply. They hurt us. And I chose not to become them. You chose to become worse. He had no answer for that. I stood. I'm not here to forgive you, I said. I'm here to tell you that every time you close your eyes in that cell, I hope you see me. Not broken. Not afraid. But free. He opened his mouth. Please, I cut him off. You called yourself my protector. But real protectors don't destroy the ones they love. They don't leave scars that last a lifetime. I turned to leave. But just before I walked out, I looked back one last time. You were right about one thing, I said. I am nothing like you. And I walked out of that prison feeling lighter than I had in decades. Because that was the day I stopped carrying the shame that belonged to him. That was the day I realized he may have been my beginning, but he sure as hell would not be my ending. After my husband was sentenced and my brother was locked away, the storm outside finally calmed, but the one inside my son was only beginning to show. He had watched the downfall, the confessions, the wreckage of his bloodline unravel in courtrooms and headlines. At first, he stood beside me, proud and present. But slowly, something shifted. He stopped showing up to foundation meetings, stopped answering my late-night messages, stopped calling me mom. It began with silence, then distance, then the worst of all, avoidance. One day I found his phone number disconnected, his apartment abandoned, his social accounts scrubbed of my face like I was a ghost that never existed. And when I finally tracked him down months later, standing outside a clinic where he worked under a new name, a new job, a new life, he froze when he saw me. Like I was a mistake he thought he'd buried. I'm not ready for this, he said, stepping back, eyes guarded. Not ready to face me or to face yourself? I asked. He didn't answer. I gave up everything to protect you, I said. I took beatings. I lied under oath. I lost years of my life so you wouldn't grow up without a father or uncle. And now you pretend like I'm the shame in your story. His jaw clenched. You think I wanted you to lie for me? He snapped. You think I asked you to carry all that pain? You chose that life. And now you want me to carry the weight of your scars. That broke me more than any belt ever had. Because it wasn't just betrayal. It was rejection. From the one person I thought would always see me. But instead of crying, I pulled up my sleeve and showed him the cigarette burn on my arm. This, I said, voice like steel, was from your father the day I told him I was going to report him. You were 7. You were playing with Legos. I didn't scream because I didn't want you to hear. He looked away. I stepped closer. This scar on my thigh? From your uncle. After I refused to lie for him again, I said no. He broke a glass and drove it into my leg. His breath trembled. I kept going, even when my body wanted to collapse. Not for me. For you. So you'd have a future. He finally met my eyes. Then why does it feel like my entire childhood was built on a lie? He whispered. I remember smiles. I remember birthdays. How do I know what was real? I nodded. That's the curse of surviving abuse, son. The lies had to feel real because they were the only way we made it through. But I'm not asking you to feel guilty. I'm asking you to see me. He crumbled then. All the walls collapsed. He reached for me, and I held him like I did when he was small and scared after nightmares. But this time, I was the one who needed it. I'm sorry, he whispered into my neck. I thought forgetting it all would make me free. No, I said. Freedom comes from facing it. We stood in the quiet of that alley behind the clinic, 2 people who had walked through hell in different shoes, finally standing on the same ground. And when he pulled back, he looked at me not as a mother or martyr, but as a woman who had survived the worst of men and still chose love. I want to remember it all now, he said. The truth. Your truth. Our truth. And in that moment, I knew something powerful. I hadn't just raised a son. I had raised a witness. And together, we would rewrite the ending. You're still here. Still listening. That means more than you know. Before I tell you how this ends, or rather, how it begins again, Let me ask, where are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. It gives me strength to know I'm not alone in this world of shadows and silence. And if this story touched even a corner of your soul, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Whispers and Wills, where truth bleeds but never breaks. Now, the final truth. After everything, my husband rotting in a cell, my brother banished to darkness, and my son finally seeing me fully, people asked how I moved on. But I didn't. I rose. The house where it all happened? I burned it down not with matches, but with papers. Sold it, piece by piece, until every floorboard that heard my screams belonged to someone else. I took that money and built a shelter. A real one. For women who had no one. For girls who were told, like I was, to smile through the bruises and keep secrets behind locked doors. It's called Eleanor's house. Not after me, but after my mother, who never escaped her own prison. She died silent. I would not. We taken anyone. No questions. Just open arms and locked gates to keep the monsters out this time. And my son? He works with us now. Helps with counseling, fundraisers, even drives the van that picks up women too scared to walk out of their lives alone. He still calls me Mom, but now he adds something else. My hero. Some nights, I sit with the women, tell them my story, not just the pain, but the power. I show them my scars. I name my abusers. And I tell them the truth the world tried to bury. You're not weak because you stayed. You're powerful because you survived. And even more powerful because you're here now, ready to rise. They cry. They shake. They whisper thanks. And I always whisper back, you don't owe me thanks. You owe yourself freedom. So here's the truth, the real ending. For anyone still listening, I was tied naked to a chair. I was beaten until I bled. I was spat on, dragged, silenced, and nearly broken. But now? Now they whisper my name when they speak of strength. Now they fear my voice in the courtroom. Now they wish they had killed me when they had the chance, because I came back stronger. Not for revenge. Not even for justice. But for every woman still living in a cage no one else sees. This isn't just my story. It's ours. So, if you're still here listening, tell me, where are you from? Which part of this story found you? Because I promise you this, you found me too. And I'll keep telling the truth until none of us ever have to lie again just to survive. Now go. Live loud. Live free. And remember, they thought breaking me would end my story. But I was only just beginning.